Well, hello, everybody. I am very, very excited today because on my program, I have my dear friend, Dr. Andy Woods, who is taking time from his busy schedule to share a few thoughts and discuss a few things regarding the Bible, end times, and Israel. So, Dr. Andy Woods, thank you for coming to the show.
Olivier, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you. And now, if I'm correct, you are you are the president of Schaeffer Seminary. Give us a few words about Schaeffer Seminary. Where is it? What does it do? Why is it different? Why should people go and investigate what you do at Schaeffer Seminary?
Well, we have online campus through a church in Albuquerque, but with today's technology, that's sort of become irrelevant. Our faculty are dispersed throughout the country and in some cases the world. And so we deliver theological education with today's technology from anywhere to anywhere.
Is
And
it a master's program or a doctoral program? What is it?
we offer a kind of working from the lower end to the higher end. We offer a 30 unit credential. If people want to go on from there, they could get a 60 unit master's degree. And then, sort of, our crown jewel degree is a 120 unit traditional THM, what's called a THM. So we started the school. I'm the second president. The founding president is now with the Lord, Dr. George Meisinger. And there's just sort of a belief that our evangelical seminaries are getting away from what made them great, why they started, which is exegesis, Greek and Hebrew, systematic theology, dispensational theology, which no doubt we're going to brush upon here, a literal understanding of Bible prophecy, a commitment to the historicity of Genesis 1 through 11. And we kind of felt like a lot of our schools were moving away from those things. They were moving away from the doctrine of grace, salvation by faith alone. They were kind of front loading or back loading a lot of works into justification. And we just felt like these schools were getting away from what made them great to begin with. And so
They are.
we
They
saw
are.
that. And so we saw that trend and we just wanted to get back to the basics.
Good. Well, so if people want to, what's the website for the seminary?
Just go to www.chafer, CHAFER.edu. Not to be confused with Schaeffer, as in Francis Schaeffer, but
Right.
we're named after Louis Sperry Schaeffer because we believe in his original philosophy of education.
CHAFER.edu. Okay, thank you. And also, you are the senior pastor of Sugarland Bible Church. I've been there. I've spoken there. I've been at conferences there, and it's a few hours from where I reside. And if people want to watch, if they're not in your area, if they want to watch sermons online, where do they go?
Yeah, well, you've been there, and you're going to be there because
I'm
you're
going to
one
be.
of our conference speakers, and then that Sunday. I think you're going to be speaking Sunday morning,
And that's
following the
coming in
Friday,
February next year. Yeah.
February, yeah, end of February. But anyway, to find out about that conference or to get our archives of our teachings, just go to www.slbc. Of course, that stands for Sugarland Bible Church, slbc.org.
Okay, perfect. So uh, let's get into the show. I want to start with basics, and people might wonder, like, well, why do we go to such basics? Well, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the Bible is under attack today. So the first question I have, it's going to sound very basic, and we don't have to spend too much time on it, but can we trust the Bible? And if the answer is yes, why do we know that we can trust it?
Well, I think the Bible is trustworthy. I mean, there's a lot of different proofs for it, but to me, people have been after it for 2,000 years, trying to discredit it. archaeologically, historically, trying to attack the transmission of the text, the manuscripts, you name it, trying to come up with alternative theories for the empty tomb, trying to post date Daniel into the second century rather than the sixth century, trying to divide Isaiah up into parts to
Up to
make it
three
sound,
Isaiah, right? It's up to three
yeah,
Isaiahs now.
I think there's three. Trito, proto, deutero, trito is higher
And we believe in
criticism.
we believe in proto. We believe in one Isaiah.
Yeah, what a thought.
I know, I know.
But
And by the way, is the Jesus Seminar still doing things? Do they still exist?
I don't know, but it's like their spirit lives on. And whether they're formally around, a lot of liberal scholars that just changed the name
Right.
are doing the same kind of thing. They're trying to attack whether the text was reliably transmitted, and so they kind of cast these colored beads into a jar as they all vote on, well, Jesus or Yeshua, is this an authentic statement or was that added by the community much later? And lo and behold, as they do that, they come up with a rendition of Jesus that's very PC, politically correct. All of his
How
harsh
surprising.
sayings, surprising. Like these scholars are they're basically activists masquerading as scholars, as I call it. But
Exactly. And very
they
liberal.
come up with kind of a rendition of Jesus that omits anything that might be offensive. So I guess my point is, people for 2,000 years have been doing this kind of thing, and here we are 2,000 years later. No argument has been advanced to discredit the Bible. Christianity is spread all over the world, and is alive and well. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's
if
probably one of my. Go ahead.
no, no, I was gonna say if we let them continuing, if we let them to continue to take out what they don't think is biblical or the saying of Jesus, we might end up with a very thin Bible just with a bunch of maps and that's it.
Well, that's true.
You know,
And the stuff, as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun.
you know.
And if the Bible hasn't been taken out at this point, they're not going to be able to do it. People today are not smarter as much as they think they are than prior
Right,
generations.
right, right.
And so I guess that's one of my reasons why I think the Bible is true. It's withstood every single test a piece of literature
Yes,
can
it has.
endure.
So how would you define inerrancy? It's in simple words, the inerrancy of the Bible. What does that mean?
Well, I think what it means is the Bible in the original manuscripts, not in copies of the manuscripts, which, by the way, are very reliable, and not in, let's say, English translations of those manuscripts, which to some extent are very reliable as well. But in the original manuscripts, as those were recorded, they were recorded without error, not just in spiritual things that you can't see, but in things you can see and validate, such as archaeology, geography, history, science. So the Bible, when it was originally written, its manuscripts was composed without error. So
Right.
I embrace what's called plenary, or full inerrancy.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. So as assuming, agreeing that the Bible is without error, and how should we pay attention? Because this is something that's been really bothering me in the last maybe the last decade or so, where Bible teachers and pastors and even seminaries are have been getting away from teaching Bible prophecy. And a lot of people, when we say prophecy, they raise their hand. They go like, "Oh, it's going to be like conspiracy theory and a newspaper exegesis." Why should we? I mean, should we pay attention to Bible prophecy?
Well, I think so. I mean, to me, Bible prophecy is the ultimate proof that the Bible is true. You look at Paul as he evangelized there in Thessalonica. In Acts 17, 2 and 3, he appealed to prophecy. Now, of course, in this case, we're talking about prophecies that were fulfilled in Yeshua in his first coming. But when he went into the synagogue, as was always his custom, he would reason with the Jews in the synagogue, which he did for 3 weeks. And you see it there in Acts 17, 2 and 3. He's reasoning that with them from the scriptures. What scriptures? Their scriptures.
The Jewish Bible.
The Jewish Bible, Tanakh, as we would call it.
Right.
That, in fact, what was spoken of Yeshua prophetically hundreds and thousands of years in advance, some cases thousands of years in advance,
Right.
was fulfilled. And then you look at the upper room where Jesus, Yeshua, John 13, I think it's verse 19, and then it's repeated in chapter 14, the next chapter, I think it's around verse 29. He basically says, I'm going to tell you what's going to come to pass before it comes to pass, so that when it comes to pass, you will know that I am, title for God, ego eimi, goes back to Exodus 3, verse 14, the divine title. You will know that I am He. And a lot of the things he was speaking of there in the upper room happened that week.
Right.
So I just have a very simple question. Why would these 11 men, Judas having left the group already, why would these 11 men go to their graves? Every single one of them, with the exception of John, died of unnatural causes.
Yes,
They were martyred.
and not the most pleasant ones. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think maybe you were quoting somebody else, but I think in one of your teaching, I really like that because it was so simple. You said prophecy is history given in advance.
Yeah, it's history in advance. That's the definition of prophecy. And when you get over to Isaiah 40 through 48, and that's that great section where Cyrus's name, is called out 150 years before he was born as the political deliverer that will take the nation out of the
Babylon,
captivity.
out of Babylon, yeah.
Yeah, out of Babylonian captivity. But it's in that section. I jotted it down, Isaiah 48, verse 3 and verse 5. This is where the Lord says, this is how I'm different than all the idols. I'm omniscient, and I'll prove it by revealing to you history in advance. None of your idols are going to be able to do this. So I think when we get into apologetics, to me, prophecy is perhaps the greatest apologetic that we have. That the Bible is God's word.
And so, and the prophetic word is, if you look at the prophecy of, I look at prophecy two ways, forthtelling and foretelling. And if you look at what the part of the prophetic work that speaks of the future, what is it, 23% of the Bible, something like that? I think.
Well, by my count, and I get this figure from J. Barton Payne, who wrote a really big, thick book on, I think it's called the Encyclopedia of Bible Prophecy or something like that. And he just went through and tried to figure out how much of the Bible predicted the future at the time it was written.
Uh-huh.
And he comes out, his number is 27%.
27%, okay.
Yeah. And by the way, J. Barton Payne was not in our dispensational camp at all. He was sort of an antagonist towards it. But he said, look, let's just figure out how much of the Bible was prophecy, future oriented prediction at the time it was written. He comes out with over a quarter of it, 27%.
Yeah, it's almost a third. So that's quite a bit. So we should pay attention. There are some pastors who, we're not going to name names on this show, but there are some pastors and churches who say we should even unhitch from the Old Testament, from the Jewish Bible. And I'm not going to ask you to make any comment because you and I disagree 100% with comments like this. So we're just going to, it's crazy. Now, we look at prophecy. A serious, honest student of the Bible looking at prophecy is definitely going to find out that Israel is mentioned at least a couple of times in the Bible, right? What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that every prophet, let's just look at the prophets, the Nabim, okay, in the Tanakh acronym. Nabi means prophets. I
Right.
am
And it would
ending
be all the
plurality.
prophets, minor and major, which is a Western division that
Yeah,
Israel didn't have in the original manuscript. It was all the prophet. The prophets include
yeah,
minor and major. But anyway, so all those prophets, go ahead.
all of them, every single one of them, and the only exception I know of is Jonah. Every single one of them predicts a return of the Jews to their homeland, their ancient homeland, in the last days after a time of global or worldwide dispersion. Now, that's just the prophets. I mean, we haven't even factored in the historical books, which lay out Israel's covenants. And so we're both mutual friends of Arnold Fruchtenbaum.
Yes.
I love his title of his dissertation that he did at NYU, where he said it's entitled Israelology, the missing link in systematic theology. Because we've had all the ologies for a long time, angelology, pneumatology, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, how do we ever miss
I
Israelology?
know, I know. Think about
It's
it.
like, duh.
You just mentioned that he did his dissertation, his PhD at NYU, and I'm thinking, would he be able to do it today in the climate that we're in? But we'll talk about that later. But things have
Yeah.
changed so much. I'm not even sure they would have accepted that title and that topic today. Because academia is one area where we see a lot of anti-Semitism, but I agree with you. Israelology is definitely it was a missing topic in all the ologies of systematic theology. So when Arnold came up with that, it was such a wonderful addition.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about Israel today, the one thing that comes to mind, and that it really irritates me, and I know it does you as well, is when people advance the false theology known as replacement theology. So also called supersessionism. I think it's the fancy word for it. So explain to us a little bit what it is and why, as serious students, students of the Bible, we should reject it.
Well, supersessionism goes back to its first formal treatment of it by Augustine in his book, The City of God, fourth century. I mean, there's signs of it before that, but that's the first, really aggressive expression in written form.
Not by
And
name,
it's,
but by concept, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's basically the idea that the New Testament church has superseded. That's where you get supersessionism, superseded permanently God's um, uh, purpose in national Israel. So the church is called the New Israel, and whatever promises were made to Israel as a nation are kind of allegorically, because you can't sustain this through a literal interpretation, are kind of allegorically transferred to the church in a spiritual sense. It conveniently, none of the curses that Israel will go under via discipline, Deuteronomy 28, etc., are not transferred to the church. Only
Just
the
the blessings.
blessings,
Yes,
and
I
those
know.
take on kind of a spiritual form. And so they don't really believe there is a future plan or purpose for Israel as a nation. The best thing that can happen is a whole bunch of Jews can get saved, before Jesus comes back. But other than that, Jerusalem being elevated over the nations in the millennial kingdom, the Yeshua ruling and reigning from Jerusalem in the millennial kingdom, the nations of the earth going to Jerusalem to worship the king who's reigning from Jerusalem, all of that is canceled. And it's all been sort of allegorically transferred to the church.
But wait a minute now. If this is true, didn't God, out of the five covenants that God made with Israel, which is not all of the ones He made with mankind, but out of the five covenants He made with Israel, I believe four of them are unconditional and eternal. And if they are eternal, but God changes His mind, what does that make God?
Well, I think that's Paul's point in Romans 9 through 11. That's the whole reason why that section is there, because the promises that are made particularly at the end of Romans 8,
Irrevocable.
they're really not worth the paper they're written on to us, to me, to
Hmm.
members of the church. Let's put it that way. If God can vitiate the foundational covenant, Abrahamic covenant, and then, as you're mentioning, the other covenants that I call them sub covenants, but they
Right.
flow out of the Abrahamic. If God can cut the cord on the Abrahamic, which is unconditional, clearly, Genesis 15, anything he said to me in Romans 8 is really not worth the paper it's written on. So the reason this whole replacement theology, supersessionism, is such a big deal is it's an attack on God's character.
Right.
So that's why Paul in Romans 9, 10, and 11 vindicates God's character. You know, Romans 9, Israel in the past elected. Romans 10, Israel in the present rejected. Romans 11, Israel in the future accepted.
Right.
And once you get out of that section, you see God is really a promise keeping, covenant keeping God. Therefore, you can trust everything else he said to you in the book of Romans. And so that's why this issue is a big deal. It's an assault on the character of God.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So this being said, we look at Israel, we look at Israel in the Bible, and of course, I was, you know, referring to how many times we see Israel in the Bible. I said at least a couple of times. It's all over the map everywhere. And you mentioned all the prophets. I mean, Israel is a central focal point in God's program. So much so that kind of connects to the idea that God is not done with Israel, and replacement theology doesn't have a solid biblical foundation. When we get to the end times, we see that well, I mean, I believe that frankly, without Israel, the story cannot end. I mean, we
Yeah.
need Israel in the end times, and so without Israel, the story cannot end because you and I believe that by the end of the 7 year tribulation, the Jewish people, as Yeshua promised, or Yeshua warned Israel in Matthew, he said, you will not see me again until you say, "Blessed is you, comes in the name of the Lord, Baruch haba b'Shem Adonai." So a lot of people are not even aware that Yeshua will not return. That's not the rapture, that's the second coming. That's after the rapture. At the end of the tribulation, Yeshua will not return until Israel corporately recognizes that um, ancestors rejected and missed the Messiah at his first coming. So I believe, and you've heard me many times, including from the pulpit of your own church, saying that the Jewish people doing that is what's going to put an end to Satan's career, and he doesn't want to have an end to his career because he doesn't like his retirement. So he wants to stop the Jews from calling on Yeshua, and he is behind anti-Semitism. He's the one who created it to really create the big divide and push the Jews away from any chance of salvation. Now, a lot of people on top of that, they don't necessarily understand that, but I've been getting a lot of questions recently about the where are we on the prophetic time clock. I mean, it's like 11:59, and I do believe that events are happening at a greater frequency and intensity,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean the curve is going up really quickly. Uh, so I have some basic question. Some people are wondering, when we're looking at the event in the Middle East right now, and I'm referring, of course, to the Israel-Hamas war that's ongoing. It's been going for exactly a month now. So basic questions. Is it the beginning or the setting of the stage for the war of Psalm 83? And is Psalm 83, as we read it, that the psalm that Asaph wrote, is this even a war in the sense of a conflict between Israel and her enemies, or is it something else? I think you and I are on the same page on that, but I want to hear your take on it.
Yeah. Well, leaving Psalm 83 out of it just for a second, clearly, in my mind anyway, what's happening right now is stage setting for the tribulation.
Yeah.
Zechariah 12, 2 and 3, Zechariah 14, 2 and 3 predicts worldwide hatred against Israel. And what you're seeing in the Middle East is that is being, fanned into full flame.
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't anchor it in Psalm 83. To me, Psalm 83 is a distraction, the way people are teaching it, because they're not really respecting the genre of the chapter. Psalm genre means a literary kind
I
or
know
type.
It's a French word. I know.
French word, yeah. So, Psalm 83 doesn't there's it's not a prophecy. In fact, there's no war mentioned in Psalm 83. Now, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, you have a prophesied war. It mentions weapons being burned for a certain amount of time, 7 years, I think it is, bodies being buried for a certain amount of time, I think it's 7 months. There's warlike details in it.
There's war
Uh,
terminology in the passage.
yeah, Psalm 83, there's no war. There's no war at all. So what Psalm 83 is the genre of it. It's an imprecatory prayer. It's written by Asaph, and he's basically praying down, as sometimes God's people did, judgment on God's perennial enemies. And he's basically praying for justice one day. And it's tricky because in that particular imprecatory prayer, he mentions specific nations. So that's why everybody thinks it's a prophecy about specific nations, but it's not a prophecy. It's not a prediction. It's just Asaph saying, Lord, I want you to deal in retribution with these enemies of yours one day. And in the prayer, he names the specific nations. It's not a prophecy of a predicted war. Sadly, people are turning it into, a part A and part B scenario where Psalm 83 happens first, and then Ezekiel 38 and 39 happens second. They have all these scenarios, and they sell a lot of books and pack out a lot of conferences.
Yeah,
My view,
you and I are writing the wrong kind of books.
yeah, and get everybody all amped up and lathered up over this, but they're abusing the genre of the chapter, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. It's interesting because I think that by putting the emphasis on the wrong part or on the wrong part of the psalm and trying to fit Psalm 83 into a war, they miss a couple of very important verses in the beginning of the psalm. Something that we read when the enemies of Israel want Israel to be no more, and it says, and Asaph tells God they Israel, they conspire against Israel and against you. They conspire against you, and this is one of the strongest verses in the Bible to prove that when you don't like the Jewish people, you go against God. You cannot love God and hate the Jews. It is not compatible. And so that's one thing that I like to point people to in Psalm 83. The other thing I think is also important is towards the end of the psalm, even though Asaph is pleading with God, he's going like, this is all these are the enemies of Israel, and we are hated, and in his own way, like it's kind of some kind of a literary device. At the very end, he's also when he's asking God to serve justice, he still leaves room for the mercy of God. There's still in that, there's one verse, I think it's 15 or 16, when he says, I don't have it in front of me, but he says like, may they repent, and if they don't, destroy them. So he recognizes that there is room for repentance even for the enemies of Israel. And I think those are two things that the people who focus on the 10 nations that go after Israel miss in their exegesis of Psalm 83.
Yeah, there's wonderful application in that psalm for us, and people bypass that because they're so eager to build a part A, part B prophetic scenario.
Right, right. So Psalm 83, it is not what's happening right now. We're not setting the stage for Psalm 83. What about Gog and Magog? Is this the setting of the stage for Gog and Magog? And what is
Well,
Gog
I
and
think,
Magog in a few words?
yeah, well, Magog is the famous or infamous prophecy found in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is a real prophesied eschatological war. There, about 8 or 9 nations are mentioned coming against Israel to take her wealth, her plunder, silver and gold. We believe Russia is spearheading it, coming from the remote north, and she'll be accompanied by some others like Turkey,
Turkey. Yeah.
Iran, and others. And I believe that what is happening right now is bringing into sharper focus that prophecy, because what's happening now is pushing all of these alignments, nations rather, into their proper prophetic alignment. I mean, Russia is
Yeah.
exactly where she's supposed to be.
Yep.
Iran is exactly where she's supposed to be. Turkey is exactly where she's supposed to be, and that hasn't always been the case. But
No, 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 not at least not simultaneously like that.
yeah,
And
and then of
now,
course
go ahead, go ahead.
Even Sheba and Dedan protesting. I think that's around verse 13. That's Saudi Arabia. She's being pushed into place through the Abraham Accords.
Right.
And so everything that's happening is putting all of those nations into their exact position, to ultimately fulfill Gog Magog, which I believe will take place in the tribulation period itself.
Now, thank you for the explanation. I, from what my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I look at Ezekiel 38, I see at least three times details about this happening when Israel is living peacefully, living at peace. No walls, no barriers, no danger. And I don't see this happening in my understanding of the end times event anywhere outside of the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. From the Daniel 9:27 signing of the peace treaty between the Antichrist and Israel to the abomination of desolation at the midpoint of the tribulation. So my understanding is that Gog and Magog will take place during the first 3 years of the tribulation, from the signing of the peace treaty to the abomination of desolation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, when you look at verse 8 and verse 11, you'll see two Hebrew words there, batak, which means security. And then you'll also see another word, shakat, which basically means tranquility. And you look at the condition of Israel right now; she's obviously not experiencing really either of them.
And even prior to October 7th, let's not just focus on what's happening right now since October 7th. I mean, since 1948, Israel has not been at peace 100%.
Yeah, and so somebody has to come along and guarantee her protection and give her temporary political peace. And we know who that is. That's the Antichrist of Daniel 9:27. It's the rider on the white horse, Revelation 6:1 and 2. So I'm with you. Only after that is entered into will you have Israel having Batak and Shakat.
False peace.
False peace.
Semblance, a
Yeah,
semblance of peace. Yeah.
it's not permanent. It's not like when Yeshua returns, he'll bring in permanent peace, but this is a false peace. And you're really not going to have that until towards the beginning of the tribulation. I'm thinking chapter 39, my view on it is a little different than a lot of people. I think the two chapters don't happen concurrently. I'm seeing chapter 38 in the second seal judgment where war breaks out. And then chapter 39 is really the after effect of everything. The traffic jam in the building of a certain city, the paving the way for the millennial temple, the burying of the dead, the destruction of the weapons. So I think those are kind of a flash forward to the end, perhaps, or even beyond the end, the
So
after
you,
effect of the
so you don't
tribulation.
see chapter 38 taking, you don't see Gog and Magog taking place in the first 3.5 years of tribulation?
I'm seeing chapter 38 in that sense, with seal judgment number 2,
Okay.
first 3.5 years.
Okay. So you
But
do.
I'm
Okay.
seeing chapter 39 as more recording what happens as everything is being kind of mopped up after the tribulation period is winding down, or maybe even can't come to a close.
But some people have problems with the destruction of the I'm
Yeah.
missing, the 7 years going into the millennial kingdom. Was it the destruction of the weapons or the burning of the bodies? What is it? I forgot.
Well, both, but people say the weapons can't burn in the millennium because my
That's it.
view
Yeah,
has
yeah.
weapons burning in the millennium for 7 years. I'm like thinking, well, why can't you? The millennium is not an ex nihilo new creation, it's a renovation. And like the eternal state will be a brand new
See,
creation. So I don't,
yeah, I would have a problem if any of that would take place in the eternal state.
yeah,
But the
but
millennium is, we're going to have people rejecting Yeshua during the millennium, and then even Satan is going to be released for a short time at the end of the millennium. So it's not the perfect bliss that will be the eternal state yet.
right. And beyond that, you've got Babylon burning throughout the millennium. You'll find that in Revelation 2 and 3. And beyond that, you've got bloody animal sacrifices, I think, as a memorial
Right.
in the millennial temple. And Isaiah 65, verse 20, talks about how death will be rare, but it will still happen.
Right.
So people kind of confuse the millennium, which is a renovation, with the eternal state, which is an ex nihilo new creation with the curse, totally
Right.
removed. And the millennium is just kind of rolled back. So I'm not, I've never really been on board with people that have some big problem with weapons burning in the millennial kingdom.
It doesn't seem to, it doesn't bother me either, but some people don't, they like to everything to fit. So that's never been a big issue for me. So as I wrap up this, because I want to make sure that we wrap this up, we fit within the time that we have. Let's talk a little bit about, give me your take on what's going on in Israel, and I've been doing a lot of interviews, a lot of writing and speaking recently on what's happening with anti-Semitism. Uh, what do you see? What's your response to that? And in all this, what should be the general Christian response to what we're seeing in Israel and globally against the Jews?
Well, I guess I've been sort of surprised. Um, the reaction, when you look at Sydney, Australia, people, they're in front of that old Opry House saying, gas the Jews. You see entire bridges being blocked, all over Germany, Europe. You see stars of David being put on Jewish homes in France.
Yeah.
And I think that's also happening in Germany, if I have that right. But it's terrible. Seeing, gosh, they really clamped down on the J6 protesters. I'm seeing bigger protests in Washington D.C. speaking out against the Jews, trying to defend the so-called Palestinians.
Right.
I guess I've just been sort of shocked at the worldwide, reaction against Israel, sort of portraying them, as the bad guy. And here's this little tiny nation that has every legal right to be there. When you study out the legal ramifications of it, and we believe God put them there in fulfillment of His plan, being reacted against by the entire world. And so I think the Christian response is to speak up for Israel, stand with Israel, and articulate that they're not the oppressors, they're the victims.
Correct.
And it's kind of like what they're doing is they're kind of transforming David into Goliath and making it look like Israel, like the current administration. What's their reaction to the whole thing? They want to pass laws, etc., stopping Islamophobia,
I know.
meaning Jewish attacks against Muslims. Well, I don't know of any Jewish attacks against Muslims. Maybe you could find me one. You'd have to probably get a microscope out to find it.
Right.
But all of the anger is going the opposite way. I mean, there was a rabbi that was recently murdered in New York. Um,
Yeah. No,
So
it's
the world, God said the world would turn against Israel. Zechariah says that twice.
12:3, and yeah,
Yeah, 12:3 and 14:2 and 3.
right.
That's what we're seeing happening.
So we shouldn't be surprised. We should be concerned because uh, uh, I mean, you started your statement by saying I'm kind of surprised. I'm not surprised by the fact that it's happening because I've been following anti-Semitism for over 2 decades now. But I'm surprised by the frequency and the intensity, and also by the fact that I'm witnessing it in my lifetime. I thought that we would see a little bit of that, and then there would be the event that you and I, understand as the rapture of the saints. The when Yeshua comes to get the church before the tribulation. But of course, I don't believe. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe there's anywhere in the Bible any verse that tells us that it's going to be smooth sailing until the rapture and then everything goes bad. We could, and we are seeing a great decline of, I mean, an increase, I should say, in world event and in anti-Semitism and in violence and crime like we've never seen before, and we haven't even seen the rapture yet, let alone the tribulation. So I think we possibly could see even more violence in the days and weeks and months to come. And but I agree with you. It's a sign of what is about to take place. Meaning the events of the Great Tribulation, and that leads me to maybe the final thought. If the Bible is true, if prophecy is accurate, if Israel is really in God's plan, and if we see Israel being attacked like this, ushering in the events of the upcoming rapture, which could happen anytime, and the tribulation, and the terrible turmoil and death with during the tribulation. If this is all true, uh, what's the most important thing that people should do right now to make sure that their future is secure?
Well, kind of the analogy that I love to use, and it works perfectly this time of the year, is the signs of Christmas. Santa Claus in the department store and Christmas music and Christmas lights, Christmas trees, etc. The signs of Christmas indicate that Thanksgiving is near because,
Absolutely.
right, Thanksgiving occurs earlier on the calendar than Christmas. So, by way of analogy, if the tribulation period is coming and we see the shadows of it constantly, if it's coming this fast, then the rapture of the church, where, as you mentioned, we're not, the doctrine doesn't teach we escape trouble. We have many troubles in this life, but we do escape one form of trouble,
The
which
wrath
is
of
God's
God.
wrath.
The wrath of God, yes.
And that's when Jesus takes the seven sealed scroll and begins to peel it open. Revelation 5, bringing forth God's judgments to the earth. We are spared from that. So I guess for people out there, given the fact that this event is approaching, it's only of this promise of escape from God's wrath in this life via the tribulation and in the life to come is only possible because Jesus, Yeshua, stepped out of eternity into time 2,000 years ago and absorbed the wrath of God the Father in our place. And his final words on the cross were, "It is finished,"
Finished.
which is a translation of the Greek word tetelestai,
Right.
which means paid in full. By the way, perfect tense in Greek, meaning what singular one-time action with ongoing results, in this case positive results. So there was a singular price that was paid, and because the price has been paid, the only thing that the Lord requires of us to receive it is to receive it as a gift. And you can only receive a gift from God, Romans 4 verses 4 and 5, by doing a non-work, which is to believe. And so, for those people out there watching this, wondering what it all means to them, our exhortation is for people, even as we're speaking, and it has nothing to do with supporting a ministry or clicking on a website or giving money or
Any kind of performance.
any kind of performance. It's just you're trusting in the good work Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago, rather than your own good works to make you right with God. And you can do that right now, even as we're speaking, by believing, which means to place your trust for your eternity and your salvation, the forgiveness of your sins, and the safekeeping of your soul exclusively into Jesus. And so we're not talking about multiple steps, it's a singular step of trust. And the moment you do that is the moment God takes what Jesus did for us and applies it to us. So I can buy my daughter for Christmas a beautiful gift, but it's of no value to her until she takes it and receives it.
And opens it. Yeah.
And opens it. So, in the same way, what Jesus did for somebody is of no value to them unless they receive it as a gift. And God says, here's how you receive a gift from me. You believe. So, one of the verses I like to use to explain this is John 5, verse 24. Yeshua speaking, he said, truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes him who sent me has, present tense, has eternal life and does not come into judgment, but has passed out of, perfect tense, one-time action, ongoing results, has passed out of death unto life. And so we would encourage anybody watching to do that right now, place their personal faith in Jesus and receive this promise. There's a pardon with your name on it, but it's of no value to you until you receive it. And so we would encourage people to do that. The Bible 160 times says we're justified before God by faith alone. And faith alone in what? In what Jesus did for us. And so,
Right.
and that means trust, and believe means trust, not just intellectual head knowledge. Before I was a Christian, I knew a lot about Jesus, believe it or not. I could tell you about his death on the cross. I could tell you where he was born. I could probably give you the Christmas story, but it was just head knowledge. I wasn't trusting in him for anything. It's not until I put my faith in what he did that I became a Christian.
Amen.
And that's what we would invite people to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's what I did 40 years ago. And as a Jewish person, I actually realized that, without Yeshua in my life, I was nothing. I mean, I was doomed for eternal separation from God. And then so I did that 40 years ago, and that was the most important decision I made. Well, Dr. Woods, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think it's, in light of all the events that we discussed, I think that people should really take it to heart and examine their heart and see, like, and make sure that they have a personal relationship with Yeshua, because really the clock is ticking in so many ways. So, well, listen, this has been a great hour. We covered a lot of topics. Thank you for your time. I'll put all the different way to get a hold of you in the description, and we'll have to have you again in the future very soon, unless takes us away.
Well, that's the best option, but
that is the best
shouldn't happen, I'd love to be back anytime you want me.
All right. God bless you and shalom.
Thank you.